Nice to be in orbit.
I see the flying car industry as game-changing when it comes to not only future warfare, but future military operations. Just as important, humanitarian relief operations, hurricane support, all the things that we do defense of the homeland. If you start thinking about these devices as nodes in a network, it fundamentally changes the game.
Agility Prime is a program with a vision of world impact. By partnering today with stakeholders across industries and agencies, we can set up the United States for this aerospace phenomenon. Potential outcomes are rewarding and transformative with both military and commercial applications.
I want to offer my congratulations to Dr. Roper and his team for achieving this revolutionary rapid contracting and prototyping method to bring industry and DoD together to develop this new exciting technology with both military and civilian applications. This technology will have great benefit to the needs that we have in Alaska and the Arctic, where conventional aircraft, vehicles, and vessels oftentimes can't operate.
Agility Prime is part of our Defense Department's long history of turning futuristic ideas into reality. I'm proud that the federal government is investing in revolutionary ideas. Agility Prime is leading the way.
This launch of Agility Prime is so exciting. This technology has the potential to make vertical flight more affordable and more widely available. And with the encouragement of the U.S. Air Force and the entire federal government, American companies employing American workers can gain a head start and win a fair share of this lucrative market. eVTOLs have the same agile, vertical takeoff and landing capability as helicopters, but are quieter and should cost much less to operate because of their electric motors.
We are becoming a trusted innovation partner in commercial tech. I could not be prouder of this initiative. I could not be prouder of this team. And I am excited to see how quickly we can go to help commercialize this market for our nation so that our warfighters have options they don't have today. And our nation has an economic advantage far into the future. Innovation is a battlefield, and Agility Prime is just one way we're going to win it.
Agility Prime seeks to ensure a global advantage in advanced logistics technology. Agility Prime can reduce the risk of adversary commercial dominance, resulting in military disadvantage. As the United States Air Force looks at generating combat power away from runways, those distributed logistics aircraft must be runway independent. This new transformative capability is a promising opportunity to conduct that mission in an affordable and a scalable manner.
Today, we gather for Agility Prime to drive transportation innovation, lower barriers to entry, and expand our partnerships.
We see a time when automation technologies make the requirements on the pilot much less. And we see flying as being accessible to a much wider range of people.
It is truly a great credit to Agility Prime. We can put on this virtual event with so many hometowns of the United States represented. You know, an industrial base is not really about just what a country can make. More than that, it's about the people who dream up what to make. And then, of course, those people who make it.
Afternoon. Looks like we have most of the folks on after we've opened up the session. Welcome to everyone here joining us today. We have a very exciting lineup for today. We are going to spend both our time today as well as the time next week helping all of you prepare for an opportunity that will be released here in the coming weeks, an opportunity to begin to look at alternative approaches for research and development funding. So in the course of the next several weeks, we will be releasing a small business technology transfer option for those companies that are out there and interested in joining with some of the most innovative research and development institutions that we have in the country. Those could be some of the universities, they could be private or nonprofit organizations that are going to partner over the course of the next month with proposals that will go out, solicitation that will go out here in the next couple of weeks for proposals that can be developed over the next couple of months, with anticipated awards being in October, for millions of dollars of research and development funding, specifically around different technologies associated with those areas of interest to Agility Prime. So we're gonna spend that time over today and over the next week talking to that specifically. Then on the 15th and 16th of July, we are going to have what we are calling our Agility Prime Team Up event. And this Team Up event is going to be an event where you will have the opportunity, one, to understand the interest that the United States Air Force has in this particular technology, and in particular, how we are developing new organizational structures specifically to be able to reach out to industry, to investors, to academia, to state and local partners in a way that creates this new technology for not only commercial use cases, but also creating access for the government use cases. And that comes, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, this new stand-up of AFWERX, taking some of the best airman concepts that are out there, doing that through a very unique approach to innovation on the edge, combining those great concepts with the technology that's out there that our technologists in America, through their innovation, are providing for commercial solutions. But then this partnership with Air Force Ventures under AFWERX is going to bring those in a way that we are transitioning that concept-driven technology across what we had mentioned a few weeks ago, this valley of death, taking the things from taking technologies that have been in these research organizations and funding those technologies through research, development, test and evaluation, eventually into production and into full operations for both commercial, civil operations, as well as military operations. So understanding those new structures that the Air Force is looking to create and has created under AFWERX, and understanding how you, as a stakeholder, can engage in that discussion to be able to bring this technology to your state, to bring this technology to your particular municipality, to bring the research and development funding to your university or institution, and especially to find those fantastic innovators out there in the small businesses, funding this research, potentially connecting those small businesses with large businesses in these tech areas where we really need help, whether it be from just a raw technology perspective, or in some cases, development of a supply chain perspective. So helping usher you through that process, helping us refresh our bureaucracy so that we can get to this revolution in transportation, this transformation in our national defense, and the development of this entirely new industry is going to be the focus of these next couple of days. In order to facilitate that, we've got a super panel available here today, talking first through this process that the Small Business Administration has created. A little bit of a feedback from someone there. This process that Small Business Administration has created has been ushered through under the Air Force Research Laboratories Small Business Innovation and Research Office. They're this Center of Excellence for SBIRs and STTRs, coupled with a guest that we have today from the Air Force Venture side of how we're connecting that process to the innovators across the country, both in the Air Force and in industry. And then we're going to go over to some of the interesting stakeholders that are interested in this technology and looking for ways to bring this in. So we have Julie Thane, who is here from Los Angeles City, explaining some of the interest areas for Los Angeles. And we also have back, we have this repeat offender here, PK, who is truly a legend across this space, from NASA, helping us join forces together across NASA in finding those areas with the supply chain that need help, finding those areas on this technology development roadmap that NASA has so deliberately developed over the last couple of years, and how we can now start to move into that execution. So thanks for joining. I think it's going to be an exciting few weeks ahead that's going to lead into very tangible results, contracts that are out there. These phase 1 contracts will be initially a little bit smaller, specifically getting you an opportunity to work with us, see how the Air Force is doing business differently. And then those small contracts, as we'll discuss, some of the companies that have begun this small contracting process, last year, maybe, this $50,000 contract that's now turning into a multi-million-dollar contract based on the speed that this technology is moving and the maturity that so many of the companies have out there ready to bring the benefits of this technology to the world. So with that, I'll hand it over for introduction to the panel, and look forward to having you all here and the fantastic things that this group has for us today. Jared, over to you and John to give us that introduction for this SBIR side.
Excellent, sir. Thank you so much for the introduction there. Before we get too far in, I want to make sure that that you can see the presentation I'm sharing.
Yep, we have that up. Thanks.
Excellent. So as Colonel Dillard mentioned, we're really excited about the progress of the Agility Prime initiative, and we want to talk a little bit about kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? Where the focus that we've been talking about actually leads to no-kidding government contracts and focused investment to forward these technology areas across academia, across the small business space, and across the defense marketplace as well. So the STTR is one of the great avenues that we have to get at that. And to that point, we want to introduce, without giving too much away for the team of the event here in a couple of weeks, we want to introduce the concept of an out-of-cycle STTR labeled X20D that will be serving the open solicitation area with a specific focus with Agility Prime itself. So we're going to talk about a little bit of background with STTR for folks who are not as familiar. That piece may be familiar for those who have been on these weekly meetings as of even a couple of weeks ago. But then we're going to touch on some more specifics when it comes to the STTR open topic as it relates to Agility Prime and this X20 Delta round that we anticipate opening here in just a few weeks. All right, so for background, STTR, the Small Business Technology Transfer, in short, right, we're here to commercialize dual-use research, right? We're really here to elicit and provide an incentive for compelling intellectual property, for compelling research models, and really bleeding-edge technology research out into the commercial space, and provide pre-seed funding that is non-dilutive to assist in the continued development and commercialization of that technology, right? Dual use really alludes to the fact that this is not only for the defense marketplace, which clearly we have a stake in, but also the commercial marketplace as well. And that shared investment model you'll see trickled throughout the presentation here. Ultimately, what we want to do, as you can see the intent there, is facilitate engagement across the academic space, across the research space, across the defense marketplace as well, and ultimately work together to buy down some of this technology risk in a non-dilutive fashion, and ultimately foster commercial success so that at the end of the day, the Air Force can be your customer as a small business owner or small business itself, right? An important piece of here is that for those who are familiar with the program longer term, right, they've been around for 30 years for STTR's case, right? Many times we think of them as grants, right, where they don't necessarily have a defined endpoint, right? These are actually government contracts, and so there's deliverables, and the small business in these cases are the prime contractor here, as opposed to the research institution. But we'll talk a little bit more about that here in the coming slides. For those who may not be familiar, STTR is a federal government program. It's not just an Air Force thing, right? The Department of Defense is one of 5 participating agencies. Air Force obviously being a component of that. What we do here at AFWERX and Air Force Ventures is serve the Department of the Air Force now. So that includes not only the United States Air Force proper, but also Space Force as well. Ultimately, they're here to, the program is here to support scientific and technological innovation through investment. So that's that's what we're here to do, and we want to focus that technological progress with this Agility Prime concept. Ultimately, some of the caveats that we'll talk about and specific niche value propositions for STTR specifically, as it relates to the larger acquisition procurement system of the government, is really to bridge that gap between research and basic science area, the lab, if you will, and the commercial space, right? We want to elicit that IP out of the research space and into the commercial space, and provide the resources and provide the mentoring and objectives and so on to bring that to market, so that we, again, at the end of the day, can be a customer of your small business. Many folks are familiar with the SBIR program, right? The STTR is very similar to that in many ways, in terms of being a 3-phase commercialization program, and ultimately resulting in a sole source justification that can be used by the entire federal government. But there's a few unique things that are important to keep in mind for not only this upcoming X20D solicitation, but in the larger program as well. So one, there's not a requirement for an already commercialized product. That's an important piece, right? It can be completely pre-seed, pre-sales, and does not require, commercial traction in that regard. There's also a requirement for a research partner to perform at least 30% of the work, right? That research institution can certainly be a university, as is to the kind of the traditional route, but it also can include nonprofits, entrepreneurship centers, FFRECs, which are federally funded research and development centers, as well as other entities as well. One of the unique niches here as well is that the principal investigator, the PI, can be employed principally by the small business, as you would kind of think of it in generally small business programs. But they can also be primarily employed at the research institution, right? And so when you combine that with the point above, it really starts to open up some options in terms of how you can pull those ideas into the commercial space while still maintaining current employment at a qualifying research institution. The traditional example here is someone with a high opportunity cost, like a tenured professor or something similar, where they want to start a business, they want to take that first step into the commercial space, even to establish some market research, but they're not willing to give up their current position and long-term benefits that come with it. And so through this program, they can keep their position at the university, as an example, and still continue through this program, receive government contracts, and ultimately be in a better place to transition that technology more fully into the commercial space. Ultimately, we use a commercial solutions offering, which is in contrast to the historical broad agency announcement. That allows us to really broaden our engagement, not only with the R&D communities, which is really important, and we want to maintain that, but we also have opportunities to engage with the operational communities that are many times represented by the speakers and the other stakeholders that we include here with the Agility Prime initiative. I won't read all the words on this slide for the research institution, but this is just a quote out of policy that gives you more strict left and right limits of who the research institution can be, right? If you belong to an organization who meets these criteria, or know of one that you would like to partner with, right? We'd like to include them in this activity, right? For the larger Agility Prime ecosystem, right? That goes for not only the team up event here coming up in a couple weeks, but also beyond that with the larger open topic as well. So you can find this verbiage clearly at the source there, labeled at the bottom, and we would love to expand our community and ecosystem. So if you belong to or know of an organization that would like to participate, we would love to hear from them. All right. So when we start to drill down a little bit more with the X20D open topic, right? First of all, any eligible small business can come to us through this solicitation and say, hey, I want to work with the government, right? In this particular case, as with all open topics, right, you don't have to be directly applicable to the focus areas or Agility Prime in this case, but Agility Prime is really showing how to really be showing us what good looks like in terms of being engaged up front, engaged throughout the process, and ultimately this is a great way to receive government contracts and develop your technology specific to the Agility Prime concept and be a more integral part of the larger ecosystem, which is important. You know, ultimately the intent of these open topics is to identify defense market demand. Another way of saying that is defining product market fit and understanding where you and your technology fits into this larger ecosystem and solution set in terms of Agility Prime, and be able to grow, develop, and scale that longer term into a no-kidding sustainable program from the government's perspective. So we want you to be commercial successes as well as successes in the government space as well. Some specifics I want to point out for phase 1 and phase 2 here, specifically as it pertains to this X20D solicitation. These are the amounts that we anticipate. More formal details will come available here in a couple of weeks as we talk through the solicitation at the team-up event. So, first of all, phase 1, we're looking at a 6-month, $150K contract. Not only does that provide reliable funding over the preceding, or excuse me, the following 6 months through uncertain times that we're going through now, but it also provides an extended roadway and funding stream to really dive into that product market fit and the development efforts and risk mitigation that goes into a follow-on phase 2 effort. In phase 2, we're looking at a 15-month, $750K initial contract with a potential to follow on with Strat 5 programs and other potential top-ups, you know, as appropriate. Those phase 1 and phase 2s really start to establish the technical baseline and develop your demand signal within the government, and specifically with this Agility Prime, and really allow you to move through and provide a cohesive system level perspective on your technology for the defense market and the commercial market as well. Another way to look at it is through a kind of a relationship here. You know, this STTR phase 1 and phase 2, honestly, are really just at the beginning of the incentive structure, right? They're just kind of an opportunity for us to get all the applicable folks and relevant folks in the room, and really to start to develop and evaluate options from the government perspective, and move through to having a more system level perspectives on the technology and the solution set to come out of efforts like Agility Prime. You know, with the phase 1 is a simple meet for coffee, right? We're going to kind of talk through the concept, understand your risk mitigation procedures, make sure that you understand the market, both on the defense side and the commercial side, really kind of set up the basis for interaction later on in the process. You know, by having you all as small businesses engage in a phase 1 contract, we really establish the legal basis to really have more substantive conversations with stakeholders, as compared to just a proposal package, right? It's so much more interesting, and it's so much more informative to be able to have really true interactions, as opposed to, you know, just reading about someone's profile, as it were, through a proposal. Following again that phase 1, we move into phase 2, which is a bit more substantive, that's $750K, and really allows us to start, bending metal in some cases, or really, getting into more meaty risk mitigation procedures for follow-on acquisitions and product development as well. You know, ultimately, we want to move through a strategic funding increase, which gives you a much higher ceiling in terms of the contract and effort value, as well as procurement timeline. So the period of performance for these strategic fund increase are 4 years, up to 4 years in length, right? And certainly that's a lengthening of the phase 2, But what that really allows us to do on the government side is to start to account for you in our budgeting processes, which are done years in advance, right? So by finding those interested stakeholders, developing your solution for their application, and developing a little bit more substantive risk mitigation through the phase 2, we start to really integrate ourselves into your users' ecosystem or environment, right? And provide them, start to really provide them value. And through this draft buy, this is an on-ramp, as it were, to longer-term sustainment, not only for that user, which is certainly the case, but also for the larger community as well. Ultimately, right, our end goal here is to get married, as it says here in step 4, right, which is transitioning to a formal program of record, which is, the output of the STTR system, right? There's no STTR funding for that, but there's also no limit on government input or private investment or any of that kind of thing. So evaluation criteria. This is consistent, throughout the process in terms of representing the types of things that we're looking for. One is commercialization potential, right? While you don't need to have a commercialized product right now, as we talked about before, we do want to make sure that you understand your current risk, both in terms of the needs, right, the product market fit, as well as the integration risk as well, right? Understanding the system that you're fitting into and why that's important and how you're going to overcome some of those challenges. We also want to, value and ultimately see external work, right? The valley of death, proverbially is very scary traditionally because you have one company or one concept and you have one government user that are interfacing, right? And if either one of those change or move or PCS in the military or government space, then it makes that very tenuous, right? By diversifying your impact and your customer base, your stakeholder base, you really have an opportunity to shore up that relationship with the government writ large, right? And you mitigate the risk of that one government POC transitioning. And Agility Prime is a great example of how this can look, right? You have seen so far, and you'll see here in the team-up event coming up here in a few weeks, the diversity of interest in this concept, the diversity and buy-in, both at the leadership level and the tactical level as well. So again, this is one more way where Agility Prime is showing us what good looks like, particularly in the small business space, but also in the larger technology transition space as well. Defense need, right? So at the end of the day, right, we are part of the Air Force. We do have a stake in our customer base within the Air Force and the Department of the Air Force, right? So we want to make sure that you understand not only your customer base and the risk and everything associated with your commercial sector, but also the defense side as well. So that could be understanding how those commercial and defense opportunities are different, as well as understanding where your touch points would be within Agility Prime or otherwise, right? One thing that speaks to the defense need is your relevance to the Agility Prime effort writ large, right? Agility Prime, as you saw in the video just a few minutes ago, right, has a very high level of buy-in throughout the Air Force, as well as the Department of Defense, right? And so this is a great way to diversify your stakeholder set by showing how you're relevant to this effort specifically. That's not a requirement to be able to propose to this X20.D solicitation, but it's just a great way that you can integrate with the Agility Prime ecosystem that we're building here. Ultimately, the technical and the team is important as well, right? So this speaks more directly to the technical risk of your concept, of your solutions. While it doesn't have to be commercialized already, you need to demonstrate your knowledge of the technical risk space, right? And the fact that you have the team to address those technical risks, but also the team to develop and commercialize that technical solution that you're bringing to bear, right? Certainly, you can come in with an idea, right? But that commercialization plan and that technical risk buy down, if you will, or burn down, is going to be much more substantial, right? So theoretically speaking, a product is going to be better than a prototype, which is going to be better than a lab demo. We don't discriminate in terms of where you start out in the process, but you need to make sure you address those things, those risk areas throughout the proposal itself. Ultimately, STTR, right, we've shown a large variety of successes in the space. You know, the biggest thing I can think of to demonstrate this is the simple fact that working together is better than working separately, right? By diversifying your stakeholder base, by us as an Air Force diversifying the small businesses and the industrial base that we're working with in Agility Prime and otherwise, right, is massive, right? And so over the last couple of years, over $3 has been invested for every $1 of small business funding, and at $11 of private funds for every $1 of taxpayer funding, right? Those say it all in terms of, you know, us being able to leverage our size as a market and our investment to get a better return on investment for not only the taxpayers in our defense marketplace, but for you as well, right? Because, you know, a vote of confidence from the Air Force, right, speaks to the private market as well, you know, as borne out in data here. But, you know, it speaks to our need as an Air Force to work together, right? We're more powerful together, and we can provide a more substantial market investment if we can collaborate and work together at the speed of business here. Secondly, but as John can speak to, moving at the speed of business is really important as well, right? So whether it be the contracting sprints that we've developed with the Center of Excellence over at AFWERX, or some of the business processes that both precede and follow those contracting sprints, we have really been able to reinvigorate the program to a large degree, and make sure that you're receiving, as small businesses, reliable funding over time and over your engagement, right? We want to make sure that we're consistently iterating, right, in terms of technology, and it's important that our processes on the government side reflect that as well. So, you know, as you can see there in the amounts and the awards, you know, our team is only getting stronger, and we're doing a really great job at iterating and making ourselves and our processes better over time. So, with that, you know, the next piece, right? What is the next step here, right? This team of event. I don't want to steal too much air from this team event coming up in a couple weeks, but I can tell you it's going to be a huge deal, right? The fact that we have the buy-in at senior levels, that we have the amount of funding for this project and others, right, really speaks to our ability to work together in a cohesive and collaborative effort. And we want to make sure that you guys can take full advantage of the program, both with STTR and Agility Prime. If you have questions, you can email us at sttr@afwerx.af.mil, in addition to the Agility Prime contact information as well. And then you can also look up more information on the AFWERX website, as you see there. So with that, we can either take questions or we can move on to John from the COE. Over.
Hey, Jared, this is Joey. I'd also like to jump in and say that I'll also post the official SBIR STTR help desk in the chat for everybody so that you can ask questions there.
That's awesome. Thanks, Joey.
Hey, Jared, could you also speak on the foreign participation in the STTR program and any rules or regulations around that?
Sure. In terms of who is eligible to participate, or which aspect would you like to cover?
Yeah, there's two questions. One is it open to foreign countries, and are there any restrictions on foreign subcontracting?
Oh, great question. So in order to be eligible, and I'm gonna leave let John kind of come over the top here if I say something incorrect as a resident contracting professional here. But the business needs to be U.S. based, and the work performed needs to be done and conducted in the United States, right? There's also restrictions in terms of folks working on different visas on the project itself, right? They have to abide by the restrictions of their visas in terms of number of hours and technology area and so on. But those are the two major things, right? US-based business in the first place, and then conducting the work in the United States as well.
And Jared, if I can add to that, we would like to encourage that if there is an international company, create US-based partnerships. That has been one of the key ways to look at bringing foreign technology into the US. It's one of the key things that SecDef is looking into for, we expect those companies to partner with US-based organizations.
Yeah, great points, Joey. Sterling, was there any other questions I can touch on before we move over to John?
Yeah, I think we can go over to John now.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Jared. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jared. Can I get the slides brought up, Sterling, if that's all right? Can everybody hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right, cool. All right, thanks everybody. First off, I just wanted to say thanks to the team for allowing me to come on board to talk to you guys today. Jared mentioned quite a bit about the STTR program already. So what I want to do here is sort of just essentially dovetail a little bit off what he's talked to you guys about already as it relates to STTR, and then speak a little bit on specifically solicitations and even more specifically than that, proposal development, right? And what goes into building proposals, things that you really want to be on the lookout for if and when you're choosing to respond to a solicitation, things that you can get caught, that can catch you, or things that you really need to focus on to make sure that when you submit a proposal, it not only has that technical utility that Jared and company are speaking about, but that it's also going to be compliant from a contracting perspective, right? And to certain extents, well, from a legal perspective, a contracting perspective, and then and in some ways even from an FM or a financial management perspective. So again, I'll if we can flip to the next slide here. I'll buzz through these ones pretty quick because Jared already talked about a little bit about the STTR program. So background, it's a congressionally mandated program, again, authorized in '82, and it's been reauthorized through end of September of 2022. Next slide, please. Hey guys, the slides aren't popping on my screen.
Sir, we see them.
Okay, are we on the mission statement screen?
No, it looks like whoever was sharing their screen is just sharing the one PowerPoint and not the whole presentation. So we'll probably have to restart screen sharing to fix it.
Okay.
Yep, sorry, we'll restart screen sharing. Oh, if you can, John, we'll let you go off the cuff for just a little bit while Sterling's bringing that back up.
There we go. That looks right now.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it now. That looks perfect. All right. All right. So the Air Force Cyber Center mission statement. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you guys, but it's essentially centered around expanding technology, getting technology faster, quicker into the hands of the warfighter. Next screen or next slide, please. It's just the vision statement. Again, not going to spend too much time on this. Jared already stole my thunder on this, which I appreciate. So next slide, please. Some strategic goals here, right? So increasing the overall annual amount of SBIR and STTR funding generated by projects in relation to funding that's invested by the Air Force. Increasing the percentage of the projects that get to technology transition. Again, Jared just spoke to this really well, the valley of death, per se, right? So there's an increased focus on cutting down the space in that valley. Right, we really want to see efforts now that are focused on not so much long-term potential from a technology, but technology that can impact the warfighter right now, right? And as he mentioned, it doesn't need to be necessarily commercially available at this moment, but we want to see an increased emphasis on those type of technologies. And then from a contracting perspective, a big thing right now is cutting down on the time, right, from solicitation to success. If you were to go back and look at some of the historical data, or kind of the historic way that the program has run on prior to sort of the massaging in of the open topics, is you see phase ones, which are a little bit longer, phase twos, which are longer. So what you have is from start to finish, you have years of time, as opposed to the newer model where we're seeing much quicker, much more rapid development of technologies and getting it into the hands of those users, right? And those airmen, in particular for the Air Force, who need it. So buzz to the next slide. Right, so it's a 3-phase program. Jared touched on this a little bit. One thing to point out, I think what the slide that he had that talked about phase 2 in particular. Phase 2 was focused or was geared a little bit around more of the open topic. Phase 2 is permitted to go up to $1.5 million, right? So it's up to the agency or the entity that's running the particular solicitation to kind of develop where they want to draw that line in terms of thresholds. So what I would say, and this will kind of be a theme as we go along, and it's a question that we get asked all the time. The most important thing you can do is you need to pay attention to the solicitation. All right, because just because it was done one way the last time a solicitation was posted doesn't mean that a decision is made to sort of modify or tweak that approach going forward. Right, so it is very, very, very important that you pay attention to the solicitation. You really read it. I'll say everything's important in it, but there are certainly things that are more important, right? And just try to focus on those things. Again, here highlighted in red, a key difference between the SBIR program, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, and the STTR program, which there's definitely not as much familiarity with, is the partnering with the Qualified Research Institute, which that is a requirement under the STTR program for phase 1 and phase 2. If you do not have that partnership, your proposal will not be eligible. And then the last bullet again there is just the DoD, we issue three solicitations each year. So that schedule is available on the official Air Force SBIR site. And I've got some more links as we go through here. So let's hit the next slide, please. All right, so getting involved. Here's the big thing, right? Jared talked about. How do you guys get involved with this program? Well, first of all, you're going to want to familiarize yourself with that schedule. All right, and then there's a million ways that you can get engaged. One of the primary ways is obviously through engagement with the Center of Excellence. Our office, we get questions all the time. I'm interested in SBIR. I'm interested in STTR. How do I get involved? The help desk, and I think Joey threw it up in the chat, and I have the help desk email and phone number at the end of this presentation as well. That's a great resource to ask general questions. All right. They're not going to be able to give you specific details about, hey, are you interested in this exact technology or things like that. They'll have a limited ability to answer questions on a specific solicitation. Right. The solicitation, when they're out there, the solicitation will tell you where to go to get your answers. All right. But the COE is a good start. Obviously, you've got AFWERX, who's very, very, very involved in the SBIR program, as well as the other activities that are out there, Spark Tanks, Tech Accelerators, and the like. All of these are really good ways to start to self-educate yourself and understand the SBIR and STTR program going forward. And then, as you're learning, right, as you're what I call self-educating, start to prepare your organization in advance of the release, right? You can see the solicitation schedules ahead of time, so you can start to pre-posture yourself, right? And in the case of STTR, develop those relationships with the research institutions that you're going to need. You can do that ahead of time, right? So that when the solicitation does get posted, you've already postured yourself, hopefully, to be in a position to submit a competitive proposal. A really important thing for every company that wants to play in this program is that you must be registered in the System for Award Management, or SAM. All right, the link's right there for you. You absolutely have to be registered. If you are not registered in that system, you will not be able to submit a proposal, right? Again, the solicitation will tell you this. It will tell you this multiple times. It doesn't matter. There is no exceptions. If you're not registered in the system, you're not going to be able to submit a proposal. And another thing, which is kind of it's a subtle thing, but it's very important, is that, and Jared already talked about this, right? These are contracts, not grants. So when you're registering in SAM, it gives you an option. It says, do you want to register for grants only or for grants in all contracts? To be eligible, you have to be registered to be awardable to all contracts. If you register as only able to receive grants, you will be ineligible. No matter how good your technical solution is, there is no exceptions to that. Another thing that's great is you can read the policy directive. Now, I'm going to be very honest. The policy directive is very long. It talks in great detail about the purpose of the program, how the program is structured. A lot of the things that we're sort of synopsizing here are broken out in great detail in the policy directive, but it is a very good source of information. Again, the link is right there. It's publicly available. And then if you have any questions on things pertaining to the policy directive, those would be questions that you may want to kick over to the Air Force Help Desk. Okay, next slide, please. All right, kind of the meat and potatoes of why I'm here, right? The reason that I was sort of brought on board is to talk to you a little bit about proposals and what's going to hopefully make your organization or your company be able to submit a beneficial proposal and an eligible proposal. All right, so there's a lot of key factors here in SBIR. Jared touched on this a little bit. Your principal investigator must be primarily employed by your SBC, and by your SBC we mean your company. If the PI is did we miss a slide actually? There we go. Cool, thank you. Really important point up front. Work must be research and development. The SBIR Sitter program is a research and development program. So bottom line is your solution needs to be research or research and development. We use the term R/R&D. If it's not research, no matter how great it is, no matter how interested a customer or an end user is in your solution, it's not going to be eligible for SBIR dollars. That's not to say there's not an avenue to get that work on contract, but it won't be on contract through the SBIR program. Solicitations are extremely competitive. So all of these things, when we talk about successful proposals, what makes a good one or what makes a successful proposal versus a not successful, all of these things are very important that you take into account. The biggest thing, again, is paying attention to those details in the solicitation. All right, every solicitation that comes out, it's going to have right up front, it's going to tell you when it's opening, when it's closing, what time it's closing, how to submit. It's going to have those thresholds included. If you're not compliant with any of that, if you submit a proposal even 1 minute after the closing time, it's not going to be evaluated and you'll have no chance of award. All right, so it's very critical that you're paying attention to those details. On that note, I would encourage people that are submitting proposals, don't wait till the last minute, right? Systems have issues. We all know this. If a solicitation closes at 4 o'clock and you wait till 3:59 to submit your offer, there's a chance that there could be a glitch or an issue and it doesn't go through till 4:01 and then you're not eligible. So don't wait till the end. Make sure your business information is consistent in both the system and the proposal. Right. So, and we're talking when the way you register in SAM, that data should be reflecting that exact same way in your proposal. If there's extreme inconsistencies, that could be something that in all actuality could lead you to not getting an award. Now, if it's just a slight difference in address or, you move to a different building or something, that those things we work through. But by and large, you want to make sure that all of that information is up to date and current. Also of equal importance here is you need to make sure you're a qualified small business concern in accordance with the definition at the CFR. I don't want to read that definition. It's long, it's expansive, but it's here for you guys if you're interested. The main thing is that your company, with the sum of the affiliates, has less than 500 employees. If you're over that number, you're probably not going to be eligible for a SBIR award. All right, so next slide. All right, again, principal investigator.
And John,
right?
If we can, we'll kind of keep moving along. We should have Dr. Roper joining us here in about another 10 minutes or so, and we will be collecting all the questions that are coming across to put out a frequently asked questions for folks here. And so, John, I'll let you go ahead if we can kind of finish up here pretty soon. But
yeah,
great
absolutely.
information, and we'll make sure we continue to get this out.
You got it. We'll buzz right through these last couple slides here in preparation for Dr. Roper. PI needs to be employed by your SBC. Already talked about this a little bit. The work needs to happen in the United States. There's ownership matters as well that make you eligible. So this bullet here about not being majority owned by multiple VCOCs, hedge funds, or private equity firms. And there's pre-registration requirements for that. All of this information is in the solicitation as well. Additional unique considerations, classified proposals, not usually in play under SBIR. It does happen on occasion. Various interesting types of research, human and animal subject testing, UAS research. There's going to be information in the solicitation, and you need to make sure that you're paying attention to that and complying with those requirements. Next slide. We already talked about this. The biggest thing in STTR that differs from STTR is you have to be partnered up with that research institute, right? As the SBC, as the prime company, you need to be doing not less than 40% of the work. Your partnering research institution needs to be doing not less than 30, right? So there's a blend there. We talked a little bit about the foreign nationals. A good idea is to limit the level of proprietary information that's in your proposal, specifically the work plan. Certainly it's understood that there's proprietary information that can sometimes add a lot of value to what we would deem a good proposal, especially from a technical perspective. But, and make sure you're marking all of that information when you submit it as well. Acknowledging any essentially equivalent work. So if you've done this work before and now you're just trying to submit it again, you need to acknowledge that. And, who funded it, etc. Understand your evaluation criteria. I'm not going to go farther on that one. Jared already talked about it. There's always going to be as well a fraud, waste, and abuse training that you're going to need to submit in conjunction with your proposal. Again, if you don't do this, you're not going to be eligible. It's that simple. All right, so we're just wrapping up here. The main thing, what I want to really harp on again, is you have to pay attention to that solicitation. It's long, there's a lot of detail in there, but if you miss things that are in there, or you forget a document and it's required or something like that, your proposal is not going to be eligible no matter how good it is from a technical perspective. So that's the main thing I wanted to talk with you guys today about. Thanks again for having me. Here's the help that's available for you guys. The help desk is on here. Joey threw it up in the chat. And then the DSIP submission portal. So that's when you're actually submitting a proposal, right? And you have issues, there's a help desk for that as well. So again, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Glad to have you on board. I'll take questions if you've got it, and if not, we'll lead into Dr. Roper here.
Yeah. Hey, John, if I could.
John, thanks so much.
And that is, a lot of folks are asking if they can get a review of the proposals beforehand. The Air Force doesn't review these proposals prior to your submission. So we recognize that, hey, it's a one-time submission. We are working to provide examples and a little bit of guidance on the application process. But we encourage you guys to go through the DSIP portal and read through the solicitation, as we try to be very prescriptive in what we're looking for.
Exactly right, Joey. That's a great point. This is a competition, right? This is a competitive process, right? So there's no pre-screening or anything like that. It is up to the companies that are submitting the offers to say, hey, this is my solution, right? And then the technical evaluation team is going to go in and select the best proposals from there.
Super. Well, John, appreciate the help. Joey, thanks for those comments. I really appreciate the SBIR Center of Excellence helping us along. I'd like to transition over now to Julia and hear the perspective from LA City and the way that some of the municipalities, state and local, can get involved. So Julia, thanks for helping us. We've got a little bit of extra time as Dr. Roper is held up in another meeting. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Julia Thane. I work for Mayor Garcetti's office in Los Angeles, and I work on mobility innovation. That means I work very closely with the private sector and with communities to leverage transportation technologies and different types of partnerships to reach some of our various goals, whether it's around accessibility or equity or economic development or workforce development or the environment. So very happy to be speaking with you today from hopefully a slightly different perspective than what you've heard before, particularly with regards to product market fit. So when I talk about product market fit, what I'm really speaking about is eVTOLs in the context of a larger transportation system regionally in Southern California. So with that said, given that we had limited time, I wanted to tailor my remarks mostly to how the city of Los Angeles and other cities that are contemplating UAM in their contexts are thinking through the policy focus. The city government, and especially in LA, feel that we have particular areas where we can add value to this discussion around things like the public right-of-way. So with our Department of Transportation, with our Bureau of Engineering, with our Department of Public Works, we're responsible for operating and maintaining the right-of-way, and also with providing transportation services for all Angelinos. And so we are very much thinking about UAM in the context of building out a multimodal transportation system that recognizes a second part of one of the policy levers that we have, and that's around land use and infrastructure. We know very well the legacy of highways in LA and many other cities across the country in terms of sprawl and particularly access to jobs. And it's no secret to anybody that pre-COVID, LA had a huge congestion issue. Not to mention now is starting to have one again as we reopen the economy. So we're very interested again in how UAM can help to alleviate certain pain points that we have within the system with regards to offering people, and for that matter, goods with alternative modes of transportation. The third way in which we're thinking about this is in terms of incident response. So, when you call 911, Congress doesn't answer. It's the local fire department or police department in terms of being responsible for immediately responding to emergencies or incidents, or for that matter, pandemics. And so as we're thinking through UAM, we have pulled together a interagency working group that includes the fire department, that includes the police department, and that is looking actively at how we can leverage eVTOLs in terms of making our emergency services more responsive. We're also thinking very much about the environment. And so as you all are developing the technical components of eVTOLs, knowing that to succeed in an urban environment, we are increasingly driving towards our sustainability goals, but also just aware that air quality impacts have been unequally distributed throughout the city. And so we are keenly interested in the research and the work that you all are doing on electrical propulsion and just making sure that these vehicles are clean. Other topics of interest in terms of the product market fit are around public acceptance and around equitable outcomes. So through our role as city policymakers, we understand that with any transportation mode, it goes through many rounds of public acceptance and many rounds of public engagement that we do in order to make sure that whatever is happening in the city is really contextualized and made specific to the customers that we have, our constituents. And so as we're seeing you all develop the vehicles, we're also doing work in terms of educating folks around what eVTOLs are and trying to provide some hands-on demonstrations around them. So those are the 7 areas of policy focus that we have with regards to urban air mobility. And the city of Los Angeles, along with others, has been doing work over the past 10 months or so in this space in a variety of different ways. So I'll just share with you one way that we're working on building out the policy for UAM, and that is a partnership with a global nonprofit called the World Economic Forum. So I scrolled through the 250 plus folks who are on this webinar and see actually many familiar names as part of this working group. It is a working group, as I mentioned, with 9 city agencies from the City of Los Angeles, the World Economic Forum, 3 universities, and 38 companies. As I mentioned, over the past 10 months or so, we've been doing a number of things, whether it's co-hosting workshops or doing stakeholder interviews or having multi-stakeholder, now virtual workshops to understand and work together in terms of building out this UAM policymaking process in LA. We also are starting next month going to be launching an international coalition of cities who are working on these same questions. With the idea being that we want to publish and really get going a principle-based policy roadmap to inform decision-making, not only in LA, but also that can be used in places across the country and across the world. And I'm also very excited to announce that just today, the US Conference of Mayors, which is representative of 1,400 mayors across the US with city or township populations above 30,000 people, also adopted our UAM policy resolution, which means now that we've got 1,400 cities across the US who are supportive of infrastructure funding and planning funding for UAM. So just in terms of what this policy roadmap is, I won't belabor this point too much, but we are looking not only at the principles of the urban sky, so it's important for us city policymakers to set some values and some shared ground rules for engagement, but also what it means to crawl, walk, and run from a policy and infrastructure implementation perspective. We're thinking about how can we make investments jointly in physical infrastructure, and also how we can work with the private sector and with academia and community-based organizations on social acceptance. We're very focused on workforce development, particularly at all sides of all parts of the spectrum of job skills, and see UAM as a really important way of further propelling our economy forward after, especially after the pandemic and now the crisis that we're in with regards to sort of economic conditions. And then finally, we're actually going to put together some steps around what would it take to go from piloting to scale of UAM in LA. So what are some of those concrete steps? In terms of the principles of the urban sky, this document will be available in the next 2 weeks, actually. And this is, again, something that was an output of the World Economic Forum and our work together with this broad multi-stakeholder group. You'll see some familiar topics on there, and actually some of the topics that informed the research questions I'll share with you that we would be, would love to see some of the STTR responses incorporate. And that's around things like safety, low noise, sustainability, the need for evidence-based data sharing, this idea of equity of access, multimodal connectivity, and workforce development. We also have started to put together sort of the skeleton of what a crawl, walk, run phase might look like for policy. And again, not putting the cart before the horse, but we are wanting to understand how eVTOLs will fit into the broader ecosystem of cities, and also how the understanding the broader ecosystem of cities can feed into the vehicle design and the kind of component design process that you all are doing now. So with regards to that, we are somewhere between the crawl and walk phases right now, continuing to get public acceptance for what UAM might mean for people, whether it's things flying above their heads, or increased noise in the city, or less noise in the city because of reduced number of helicopters. And we're also now actively working with NASA and PK through our LA Department of Transportation, and then the FAA, in terms of thinking about what are the infrastructure needs, vertiports, electrical digital infrastructure that'll be supportive of eVTOLs, and also help integrate them better into the transit investments we're already making. So final thing I'll share is just some of the questions that we had for you all to consider as you are responding to the STTR, and just making sure that those are also responsive in terms of what we've seen as a result of COVID. So we've seen a increase in goods movement, but also a return to driving. And so we're very interested in how UAM is going to shift people's transportation behavior. We've seen, like I mentioned, this dramatic loss in jobs in LA, and kind of unequally distributed across the city. So again, the workforce development is extremely important for us. We have also seen the interest in moving towards both safer mobility, so no contact mobility and no contact delivery. So thinking through not only how that could be facilitated by UAM, but also our emergency preparedness and responsiveness. And then finally, just knowing that folks are sensitive to noise and that there are different parts of LA that are more noise prone, thinking through, again, how the vehicle can be designed best to reduce that noise. So I'm just going to leave up here the research questions. These are just a handful of the longer lists that we had sent over to Sterling and that I'm happy to share with you all, mostly related around how might noise impacts from eVTOLs be mitigated during the different parts of flight, also around different parts or different environments, different parts of LA, but also this is, I think, generalizable to other cities. Workforce development, which I mentioned many times, planning and land use, particularly around our transportation modeling, and also thinking through how we might rezone or change some parts of the city based on what UAM might unlock, if that's sprawl or if that's increased density. And then finally, some questions around vertiport design. So I'll leave it there knowing that Dr. Roper is coming, but again, thank you so much for the ability to do an introduction and happy to field questions at a later time.
Sure, thanks, Julia.
Julia, thanks so much.
Sorry, Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, really appreciate you joining us here this afternoon, and look forward to the partnership with City of LA as they start to look at the pieces coming together. Thanks a lot. We do have now joining us here Dr. Will Roper. As many of you have seen his enthusiasm for flying cars, and I want to give him a little bit of time to give perspective on the way that we are starting to restructure ourselves to make sure that we are an easy organization to work with and a co-investor in this community. So Dr. Roper, over to you. Go give a little bit of time for questions at the end, but really looking forward to hearing your perspective and giving that perspective to all the partners that we've got online right now.
Thanks, Colonel Diller, and thanks to everyone joining online. I know we're all adapting to the changes that COVID-19 continues to impart on our lives, but one benefit that we have definitely derived in the Air Force is learning how to do virtual events and to make them more impactful for building community than getting together in one physical location could ever do. So from the kickoff of Agility Prime that was originally planned as a South by Southwest venue where we might have had 1,000 or so people be able to participate, being an online event where over 50,000 people were able to view the event at one time or another during that week. We just saw a tremendous sense of people that represent investors or builders are just citizens that are interested in understanding about flying cars, communities that want to know how to bring them into their states or cities faster, who are open to taking prudent risk if it's going to make an impact. Gave a greater variety of mechanisms to reach out and be part of the community. So I'm very happy that we're continuing it with today's discussion. I'm not going to say a lot about the big reason why, the why in capital letters for why the Air Force is doing it. I think it's self-evident that the nature in which the military engages in technology has changed. We're not in the Cold War anymore. We need to wake up. Technology now, 80% of our nation's R&D takes place commercially, but we still act in a model that presumes technology will be mainly invented inside the government, which was true during the Cold War. And so events like Agility Prime, our Air Force Ventures team that's working with tech startups are all meant to reboot our system in this decade and this century, where we need to be a partner and catalyst wherever interesting innovation is happening. And flying cars, electric and hybrid vertical takeoff and landing systems are certainly one area that we are exceptionally excited to be a partner and a catalyst and accelerate this technology and hopefully this industry base, not just for the Air Force, though our airmen and pilots are certainly very excited about the opportunity to get in these vehicles. But we want to accelerate base, not just our defense industrial base, but our industrial base's advantage as they compete globally. for limited resource and limited market. So we need to clone this model. It will be the last. But Agility Prime is the first in the Pentagon where a military service is trying to accelerate a commercial market for a benefit that is win-win, both between the military and commercial enterprise. So we're very excited to be a part of this and to be a potential partner with all of you. Now let me turn to what's happened since the Agility Prime kickoff. Tremendous steps, even though we're working remotely. So we have pivoted from the kickoff to getting companies through a series of gated decision steps that we call air races. And we've been very happy with the progress that we've been able to make, even in a short amount of time. So 14 companies have made it through the first leg of the air race to certification. And that just means they applied with the appropriate documentation. For all the companies that did that, thank you, because you would not believe how often we get documentation that does not live up to the standards we need. So you answering the mail for us really helps us your design and how to take the next steps with you. Now, already had 4 that have taken the next steps and have made it through the second leg, provided virtual site visits with very detailed discussions about the maturity of their hardware, their certification, as well as their commercialization plans. And that really speaks to a deeper level of understanding we need, especially their path to commercialization, because we're very concerted in the Air Force to not pull companies off of their commercialization path. We think that's going to be exceptionally important for the investors that are backing them as well. Working with the Air Force shouldn't mean that you have to detract from your commercial ambitions. In fact, we hope that working with us will actually accelerate, make them more likely, and make them happen faster. So we wanted to understand that. We're very excited that 4 companies have already made it that far. Now 2 have made it through the third leg, and that is issuing a request for a prototype proposal. They've provided those proposals to us that require use of our Air Force test assets at a no-cost basis to help them reduce their technical risk. And that's really exciting because it's teaching the Air Force more broadly about what our value proposition can be in emerging aerospace markets. And although we typically think of our funding as our value proposition, this is an emerging market where our testing assets, our testing expertise, and our certification process that gets the world's most amazing flight vehicles to safe flight in airspace that we control and airspace that FAA controls, that's a huge value proposition here. That our safety process is not questioned. That's why we fly jets at high speeds over stadiums all the time with no complaints, and in fact, far from it, typically roaring applause. But we're bringing that to eVTOL and hybrid vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, because if we get these vehicles through our safety and certification process without pulling them away from their commercial designs, we think that will make it much easier for domestic certifiers like the FAA to say, this thing is worth flying. So we're reducing the regulatory risk as well as the financial risk behind the companies that are trying to get through those hurdles. So for the companies that have made it that far, well done. For the investors who are backing them, congratulations. You picked some companies that we are very interested in continuing the discussion, and I see a really bright future here. Now, a second area that we've had a tremendous progress since the kickoff is engaging with states and communities that are interested in having flying cars come to a city near them and to come soon. And I could not be more excited about that. Having the Air Force get these vehicles and fly them for military missions will be a huge leg up. At least that's what we hope. The vehicles are safe, and just building that sense of trust and confidence that we hope can be the best that he can. But that's a nice first step, but you can imagine what a powerful second step it would be if we could offer these companies the chance to start flying domestically. And we will need strong partnerships with states, with counties and cities to make this happen. We are very confident that we can convince you, we the Air Force can convince you that these vehicles are safe to fly. We're going to put our own pilots in them. I can't wait to go flying in these vehicles, so count me as one of the first occupants who wants to move from point A to point B in an entirely different way. But we also want to give the public time to see these vehicles in action, their own confidence. And for those who are the daring first movers, get a chance for them to take a ride as well, is something that has been promised to them since the Jetsons aired in the 60s. So we're excited that states and cities have reached out saying, we want to be a first adopter. We want to provide an air corridor, because it's more than just the vehicles that's at stake. We need companies to be able to de-risk their plans for recharge. So if you're an electrically powered vehicle, how do you recharge them? How does the logistics work? If you're operating sites at multiple locations, if you're trying to provide what would have normally happened through local air travel, or maybe would have happened through ground travel, and this would provide a revolutionary step forward. How do you work through the logistics and de-risk them so that your business case is still positive? Well, those domestic use cases are going to be incredibly important. So for the states and cities that have reached out to me and to Colonel Diller, thank you. We really look forward to continuing the dialogue. For new interested parties that are on the call today, please reach out. We want to talk about making this a reality soon, and we need cities and states that love aerospace. And what I love about the U.S. is that history of aerospace and the history of our country are intimately intertwined, and we want to continue into the future. All of our commercially inspired endeavors in Air Force and Space Force acquisition into one organization under an extremely capable leader. We have had the experience of working with AFWERX on some of our small business innovative research investments in a new process we call AFWERX. It's working more like a venture capitalist and less like a stodgy government procurer. If you've had that experience, I hope it's been exceptionally positive. We have a lot more that we can do to improve it, but the Air Force has really flipped the script on how to act as a broad investor. We brought 1,000 new companies into the Air Force last year, awarded contracts that saw tripling of funds via private investment matching, which is a first for the government. And we're excited to capitalize on those steps in the current year. But I have now moved AFWERX as well as that AFWERX process, as well as Agility Prime, our flying car company, all under the AFWERX banner, under the direction of Colonel Diller. He is our new AFWERX director and is launching AFWERX 2.0 for me. And what's really exciting, one of the first events that he's going to be doing is a new teaming event to really unveil the new AFWERX process that's going to be held the 15th and 16th of July. It'll be an Agility Prime team-up event powered by AFWERX, but I think Colonel Diller is going to talk more broadly about how Agility Prime and other initiatives to accelerate domestic markets will dovetail hand in hand with our initiatives to be the premier investment partner of choice within government. So I'm really excited about this new hybrid engagement that has a live and virtual event combined. We're going to be bringing in our research lab, bringing in private investors, government program offices, trying to make sure that we're bringing all of our equities to bear so that we really are the government partner that can help make this a reality on our watch. And I really invite broad participation from all who are on the call today. Give us your feedback. Tell us what we can do to improve. But I'll tell you, within the Air Force and Space Force right now, innovation is coming back as our brand. And innovation happens at the edge. We want to empower our airmen and our space professionals to make things happen where they are. And events like this get innovation out of the Pentagon, where it never really happened, but it tried to, and back out into the field, into program teams that have the training, that have the resource, and that have the vision to make it happen. And you could not find a more ardent supporter in me. So I am forced to work in the Pentagon, But believe me, if I had my druthers, I would be out working with the Agility Prime team on every day, because it's never happened before. These are vehicles the likes of which the world has never seen. And that is exactly where the Air Force needs to be. So as we launch AFWERX 2.0 with our ventures process, Agility Prime, and new ideas yet to come under this one organization meant to span the bridge between the Air Force and the Space Force and private enterprise, I could not have greater confidence in Colonel Diller. He is an acquisition professional. He's a pilot. He's a tester. He knows our full enterprise. He's also an innovator. He's creative, and he inspires our junior workforce to take on risk. So he is handpicked by me for this endeavor. He has close comms. He has my trust, my support, and I can't wait to seeing what he does, shifting the gears on this amazing organization and take it into an entirely different level of effectiveness for our enterprise. So, Colonel Diller, the expectations are high, but so is your talent, sir. So, can't wait to be your wingman on this. Good things are to come. So I'll shut up there. I'll take your questions. Hopefully I can give you good answers over this event, but if not, we'll take actions and get back to you. But this is the new norm for us. We are not going to fight and win the competition we're in long term by just building military assets, military airplanes and satellites alone. That worked in the Cold War, it won't work here. Every place innovation is happening, every emerging market is a battlefield in and of itself. And if we don't win the battle in the U.S., then we'll lose it overseas. The military, and particularly the Air Force and Space Force, that are services generated out of cutting-edge technology, we have got to lead the charge on this battlefield and be side by side with industry innovators to ensure that we win the race to the goal line for our nation and for our military as well. And I think that this can be done in a way that is win-win time and time again. So let's make it happen first on Agility Prime and then clone this process forever, right? Until the world changes and innovation isn't happening the way it is. But on our watch, this is going to be the game plan we've got to execute well. Colonel Diller, let's go to questions that you've got from the team. And thanks again to everyone for calling in and participating.
Dr. Roper, thanks for your comments. Thanks for the fantastic expectations and leadership that you bring. We're looking forward to exceeding those expectations. One of the questions, as you know, many of our partners in Agility Prime were launched through the innovative effort that you led with our new approach to SBIRs and STTRs. Can you talk a little bit about some of the difficulties that you have found in that program and some of the things the Air Force is doing to make that program more accessible and improvements in that program so that we can get a broader audience?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, the Small Business Innovative Research Program is the one Congress created. It's been around for decades. And to be frank, it was born out of a Cold War mindset as well. You know, let's bring small businesses in to do research for the government and provide them an opportunity to compete for resources that are off the table for the large defense primes. But just like everything in our service, we had to pivot the program to be relevant in this era where most innovation is happening commercially. So we created the ventures process that allows for companies that are not aiming to be defense contractors as their only lot in life. In fact, they're not thinking about being defense companies at all. They're aiming to be tech companies, and they might have interest working on a defense problem if it would help accelerate them towards their commercial ambitions. We have amazing resource, amazing problems, but that doesn't mean the company wants to be engaged with solving them as their only lot in life. And so the ventures process allows companies that want to become commercial to work very similar with us as they would with a venture capitalist. It allows them to bring private investment to the table in a way that is beneficial to that company. It allows us to work with them in a way that will help them commercialize faster by giving them access to our market. And the results last year were fantastic. We brought in over $1.1 billion of private investment into the Air Force across those 1,000 new companies that I referenced. So amazing progress. We had growing pains though. We had a lot of our awards that got rolled under when COVID-19 happened. So we own that. We screwed up. And part of what I'm doing now is surging team members from across the Air Force to ensure that we can keep recent awards, that we can accelerate them and get them back on track. So the lesson for us is we didn't have enough people working our ventures work. We need to have a deep bench so that a crisis, a conflict, does not pull our eyes off of being exceptionally fast working with private companies and private investors. And of course, Colonel Diller, that's under you now. So I think it makes total sense for AFWERX to really have the reins on the ventures process, a lot we can do to speed up the contracting and the financing. But I'm very confident that this will be the year that we will iron out those wrinkles, shift another gear, and bring even more private resource orbiting Air Force problems for the benefit of us as well as the benefit of those companies and investors. Right? There's really no technology under the sun that has no import to our mission. Shame on us if a new technology cannot be applied to something we're doing. If we can't find that match, that product market fit, then we're not doing our job.
Super. Thanks for that, Dr. Roper. We'll go to one last question. As you know, we're looking at doing a launch of this STTR, and wondering if you could talk a little bit, obviously with the time that you spend in research in universities, the role that you see of universities, the role that you see as a STTR in Agility Prime and the broader strategy that we're putting together here with the Air Force and AFWERX.
Absolutely. So it's amazing to have all of these accounts. So the SBIR account was $700 million. We have an account that's a tech transition account called STTR that's it's nearly $200 million a year. It varies, but $200 million designed to help universities transition technology from university principal investigators out to companies that want to try to commercialize them. And so I view that as seed corn for what then moves into our ventures process. If you're online with us today and you work at a university, if you're a researcher and if you're thinking about starting your own company, come start it with the Air Force. We've got an account that is meant for you to get up and running really quickly. And we want to take risk by investing in deep tech. That is an area that Silicon Valley has continually moved further away from, much to the lament of many of the founders of Silicon Valley, as digital technology has allowed much more de-risked investment with faster returns on investment. So hardware, deep tech is getting a smaller piece of the pie. And this is part of the role we want to play, is by putting more of our emphasis on deep tech and then just riding the wave of where de-risked digital technology is going. We know we're not going to drive the direction of Internet of Things, machine learning, but we can use it. Instead, we should be driving technology fields that are more hardware-based, that may be 5 to 10 years away from being on the horizon of private investors. Well, the STTR account is a great way for a university, a researcher to either start a business if that's your inclination, or if you want to stay in the university and just be affiliated with a company that wants to take your technology and help commercialize it, then the STTR account can be used for that as well. And so for programs like Agility Prime that are going to be tackling a lot of really tough challenges, from power to flight safety to logistics, there's a lot of really cutting edge tech that has to be created, has to be matured and de-risked if we're ultimately going to bring this market to bear in the U.S. first. Well, STTR is a great place to start tackling the hard challenges now. And we don't expect every company in STTR to succeed, just like we don't in SBIR. This is an investment portfolio, so we're looking for return across the whole portfolio, not from a company by company basis. But we should start planting these long lead seeds now, because if we don't, they're not going to bloom in time for us to harvest in a way that will benefit programs like Agility Prime. So it's another account that's been undervalued. You add those two up, we're talking like $900 to $1 billion a year that the Air Force and Space Force have very little expectations of. What a sad thing to say, right? This could be one of the largest early stage investment accounts in the U.S., and we don't expect anything from it. And I'll tell you, folks, if we are going to compete long term against countries like China, and I can give you a whole talk about the challenges I think we have there, but you know, the way that they get to engage with their industrial base is very different. You know, they have a nationalized industrial base, and all of their companies are in support of their military, many of whom have the full financial backing of the Chinese Communist Party. Well, that's a huge uneven playing field if you're a U.S. company trying to compete in the same global markets. Well, we have got to be extra aggressive, extra prescient in seeing how the military can play a synergistic role with U.S. companies and U.S. markets and global markets, to be frank, because we're going to have to work harder because we don't have the benefit of a nationalized industrial base, and we don't anoint companies as winners and losers in our nation. I think that's a benefit. That's a near-term benefit of China's system. But I do think the way that our markets work is a long-term benefit of our system. So our aim is to try to bring the military market to bear in a way that is synergistic with commercial ones. And if we find a way to do that, it's win-win. I think we'll get the benefit of having all companies in the U.S. have the potential to work with the military in a way that benefits them without taking away the dynamic innovation that markets have demonstrated they can continually produce year after year, decade after decade.
Well, Dr. Roper, thanks so much for your time. We are looking forward to seeing you at the Team Up event on the 15th of July to continue this conversation. Looking forward to answering the questions from everyone else on the line as they're prepared to put together those fantastic STTR proposals. So Dr. Roper, thanks to you. Thanks to all of our teammates that are online with us today, and look forward to continuing this conversation next week with those who are interested in the follow-up questions that we have, and with you, Dr. Roper, on the 15th. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rodilla. Thanks, everyone. Best of luck with your proposals out here.